Good, and welcome to the Township of Whitewater Region Special Council meeting for Wednesday, February 8th at 4:45. I'll call the meeting to order at 4:45 p.m. and we'll start with our land acknowledgement. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history. And we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Excellent. We'll just go around the table and make sure there is no declarations of interest. That's good. And none seen. We'll move on to our public meeting. Our raison d'etre for tonight is a public presentation of the 2023 draft budgets for water, wastewater, and general operating and capital. And on that note, I will hand it over to our treasurer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council for being here, coming in for a special meeting. The first slide that I'll get to is, we've touched on this every meeting, is the timeline. So we're right on time with the public meeting tonight, and then assuming everything goes well, the budget bylaws would be passed in a week from now on February 15th. Just to reiterate, when we speak about percentages of levy increase, when we talk about a percentage point, it equates to $62,142. And then a reminder that the levy means what is levied upon the taxpayer, what is put on the taxpayer to pay. When we speak about municipal tax, it's a different beast than income tax or sales tax. It's calculated differently. So just to reiterate what the municipal tax equation is, there's the tax levy, and that would equal the assessment base times the tax rates. And I know a lot of times at budget times, people want to speak about tax rate. It's the buzzword. I will touch on the tax rate at the end of or near the end of the presentation. But when municipalities budget, the main driver, especially this time of year, is the tax levy, which again is what the amount that is raised through taxation from the ratepayers. So just how the levy is calculated. So we have the budget's basically into two separate compartments, or two separate silos, if you will. There's operating and then there's capital. So operating is what keeps the lights on. It's the day-to-day operations of the municipality, routine maintenance, cost of employees, supplies, etc. Capital is any type of expenditure that adds value, and typically that's real physical tangible assets in municipalities. So in some organizations you might have intangible assets such as patents and stuff to that nature. With municipalities, it's mostly the vast majority of it is actually tangible physical things you can see, feel, and touch: roads, equipment, etc. So total expenses minus grants, so any grants we'd receive, minus user fees, minus any transfer from reserves, equals the levy. And what does the levy cover? It covers capital that is not covered through grants, so the former gas tax, CCBF, or Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, so any capital that is not covered through grants or reserves, and it covers any operating not covered through grants, and some operating grants that we would have would be the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund or the Canada Summer Jobs. So the tax levy covers what those do not. So this is 2022's tax dollars. So for what the municipality collected in 2022, 31% of that, so 31 cents of every tax dollar collected, went to the County of Renfrew. 15% went to the school boards, which is the province of Ontario. 45% stay with the municipality, and then 9% also went to the province of Ontario for policing. So I think that's important just to note for ratepayers and for council and staff to understand, is that not every tax dollar that we collect, that we keep, we're essentially a conduit between the ratepayer and some of these organizations. We bill out and we collect those funds and then we pay those funds whether we collect them or not. So for the county of Renfrew, if there's tax arrears, we pay the county their portion and make the county whole, and then we collect the arrears over time. So how the budget is broken down for categorical purposes, I've split them into what you would see on the financial information return, or the FIR, which is an annual report submitted to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So there's general government, which is governance, which is council, ad hoc committees, and corporate management, which would be administration of the organization. Protective services, which is fire, police, emergency measures, building permit inspection services, and protective inspection and control. Transportation would be roads, which are paved or unpaved, and winter control, street lighting, and for Whitewater region, we have an airport that we are joint owners of. Environmental services, landfill, the curbside collection, water and wastewater. Recreation and cultural services, so that's where our parks and arenas, libraries and museums, social services, economic development, and our tourist booth, that's where that would fall under. And then planning and development is planning and zoning, industrial park, and drainage. So I know that not everything fits maybe where we necessarily all want it, and water and wastewater is in with environmental, but that is just to put them in perspective of where they would fall on the annual financial information return. So some key highlights, there's the total tax levy increase of 8.99%. 4.19 of this is due to operating, and then 4.8 is due to capital or special projects. There's a wastewater rate increase of 12.25% and a water rate increase of 9.3%. For reserve purposes, and I don't have, as of today, a final balance of the reserves for the 2022 year end, but just in terms of what the operating part of this budget calls for, is there'd be an increase of transfer to reserves to the capital reinvestment reserve. So that 2023 amount would be $336,713, which is $62,143 more than 2022, and that's the 1% levy increase for the capital reinvestment reserve that we've done over the past few years. So that 62,143 should look familiar, because that is what was the 1% increase, or what 1% increase would equate to. The election, every year that there's a non-election year, the municipality has put aside some funds of what they estimate basically a fourth or 25% of what the election will cost in 4 years from now. So when we get to that election year, there's funds set aside in reserve to pay for that. Emergency measures, which is flood management, another $15,000, the same contribution as last year. Building administration for the future replacement of a truck, that's covered through user fees. Then we have contribution to waste reserve, which is covered through user fees. Landfill post-closure, which is covered through taxation. So the landfill will be closed at some point in the future, and the municipality is responsible for those costs to decommission that site. And so it's prudent to be putting money aside. And then we have the Beachburg ORPC. So this would go into reserves. This is the funds received from the Ottawa River Power Corporation dividends and interest earned on the promissory note. So start with salaries and wages. Show a comparison of 2022 versus 2023. We can see the total full-time count from 31 to 32, and our full-time equivalent from 3878 to 4048. One of the drivers of the increase in the total dollars is the increase in the fire hours for the mandatory training. Utilities and insurance. So these are some operating pressures that the municipality, in order to operate, really doesn't have a whole lot of control over, and one of those is fuel. So with fuel, there was a significant increase from the previous year. We've implemented a system in 2020, I think it was late 2021, but the first full year that we had it was 2022, where it's a card lock system where we can track accurately the amount of fuel being used. So we've used that the amount of liters per type of fuel, so gasoline, dyed diesel, or clear diesel, we know what we've used. So we've used a number similar to that for 2022, the liters used to calculate what our fuel expenditure would be. We have hydro, and we project an increase of about 32,000. Heat, a projected increase of 15, and then the insurance increase of 25,330 is known at this time because we have received the renewal. So to speak about debentures and the current debt that we have, I've modified this slide to include the interest rates, and I've changed the order to show when some of these debentures will come off the books. So you'll see that there's a total payment in 2023 of just over $1 million, so $1,006,817. And then the amount of principal outstanding of these debentures at the end of 2023 will be $8.6 million. What's important here is when we speak about debentures and debt, is the capacity, the annual repayment limit is what the province will look at in terms of if the municipality has room to borrow or capacity to borrow. And the last annual repayment limit, and it changes each year based on multiple factors, but the last one that we have at a $1.7 million annual repayment limit. So the payment, where that filters in here, is the payment of 1.6 or just over 1 million. So there'd be roughly $700,000 of payment each year room to have. As you can see, the solar panels and the backhoe and Freightliner tandem will be coming off the books in 2024. And that's about $120,000 worth of payment or so, or $130,000 worth of payment. And where that becomes important is there's 2 approved debentures in the works right now. So Olmsted Jeffrey Lake Road for $2.5 million and Cameron, Earl, and Vera for $2.5 million. So we have budgeted in 2023 for 1 payment to Olmsted Jeffrey Lake Road, because I would anticipate that would get finalized early in 2023. And for that 1 payment would be $113,000. So going into 2024, there'd be the budget will have to increase by an additional $113,000 to factor in that second repayment. And then for Cameron, Earl, and Vera, again, a $2.5 million project, there's no payments budgeted in 2023 because I don't anticipate the debenture would be finalized for a payment to occur. But in 2024, that would mean there'd have to be 2 payments budgeted at $226,000. So there might be $120,000 coming off the books in terms of repayment from the solar panels and I believe the backhoe and Freightliner, but there'll be about $450 coming on the books. And then you'll see, I'll go back to this slide, the next time some payment comes off is 2025 at $81,000, and then you can work yourself down the list to 2051, which would be when the last payment would occur for the last debenture at this current time. Into water and wastewater. So show the water units. In 2022, we had 862 residential units. That's increased 21 to 883. Overall, the total increase in water units is 18. The water rates that are proposed would show the total 2023 residential water rate of $1,081 and 41 cents. That's up from $989.40. So a monthly change would be $7.67. And again, you can see the monthly change as you go through the table. Small commercial is the same as residential. Medium commercial would be a monthly change of $11.51. High commercial of $15.34. And then multi-residential, that is not the monthly change. That is an error in that slide, so I will report back on that 70. So that change there. But the metered rate would also show an increase of to 1.881 versus 1.721. The water budget is showing revenue of 1.24 million. 46,000 of this is salary. The FTE count remains the same at 0.4. The contract is a slight decrease. That's a contract with Aqua. And then the debt payments are basically the same, but there's a transfer to reserve of $342,600. And this is significant and important for the project in Beachburg that we've been approved our grant for, that our payment is probably going to be $550,000 or in that ballpark. So this transfer to reserve it will aid in the Whitewater region portion of that project if the township so chooses at that current time to use reserves or use rates versus using debt. So that transfer to reserve is important. Wastewater units. So we can see that we have a residential change of 10 new units with a total change of 5 additional units. So multi-residential decreased and so did small commercial, but a net change of a positive 5. The wastewater rates would show a monthly change to a residential unit of $15.37. And again, you can work way down the list here for the different classes of their monthly change. The wastewater budget would show revenue of $951,500. The FTE count is the same at 0.15, so there's very little that we budget for in-house staff to go to wastewater, especially considering 0.4 we budget 0.4 of an FTE to water, but only 0.15 to wastewater. The contract, this is a significant difference, which we'll speak to in the next slide. And then again, the debt financing is very similar. And then the other category, and this is for main breaks and expenses to that nature, where that is true more actual cost compared to, or showing 2022, 2021, and 2020. This is more in line with actual costs. And as you'll see, there's no transfer to reserves. So the Aqua contract with wastewater, here there's the comparison from 2022 to 2023. There's an increase in the salaries and management fee. Chemicals is basically the same. Again, sludge, there's a slight decrease. And then electricity, there's about a $20,000 increase. And then supplies and equipment. So those are the factors when you compare them year over year, make up the increase in the contract. So the water and wastewater rates together, I've shown a slide here for if for the user on water and wastewater, their total cost for the year to be $2,771.09. Into the operating budget for the general fund, we'll call it. We'll start with general government. So this takes into consideration council, office of the CAO, finance, human resources, legislative services, and information technology. For council, there's an increase of about $40,000 or $41,000. Some of this is to do with the cost of living, increase to wages. There's conferences, so each council member is entitled to a set amount for conferences and education. And we've budgeted so that all of the council members would meet that, have the ability to meet that the amount set out in the bylaw. And then there's a small token promotional items line item. Ad hoc committee, which is typically has been a contribution to the Muskrat Watershed Council, that would remain at $5,500, so no increase. The administration and admin building. So with administration, it's showing a slight decrease. So it's basically on par. The FTE count is a slight decrease, and this would be due to just some staffing of summer student hours. There's the legal and insurance and HR would be an increase of about $30,000, and this is as we had some transition from a staff member that we had some HR services in-house. When they left, we decided we were going to outsource to the County of Renfrew, so that we prudently have budgeted for that. But there are some decreases, obviously, with the election not taking place. And then we had a project, a records management project that was in the operating budget last year. It was a one-time big cost or a one-time significant cost to implement that project that will not be occurring in 2023. With admin building, we have a total decrease of just under $9,000. In that, we have the cleaning contract line item. There would be a decrease of that same amount. And then we have a slight increase to utilities. We have a slight increase to repairs and maintenance so that we can continue to repair the building for one-off expenses. And then we have a token line item here for flags of $2,500. And yes, we know that we may not be able to buy a lot of flags for $2,500, but it's at least a start, so we can start to replenish our flags. Just in terms of the user fees for this section, so there's a proposed hawkers and peddlers user fee of $150. So that's how I've split out the presentation for each section, is at the end of it showing if there was any changes to user fees. So on to protection to persons and property. This would include fire, policing, emergency measures, building, animal control, and bylaw enforcement. So for fire and policing, there is a significant increase of $125,800. The FTE count would remain the same at 1 1/3, but there is an increase in wages, and this is due to the mandatory training hours. There's a slight increase again in utilities, and then we've increased for building repairs and maintenance. Our fire halls are aging, and we need to have some budgeted line item for some repairs. Policing, there is a decrease of just under $35,000, so that is good news. And just on a side note, it probably should, I would think, have the police come and do a report. I see they've been doing reports to other municipalities, so I think they probably would come and explain all the good work that they're doing and the efficiencies they're finding and continuing to lower these costs. The building department, so we have an increase here of $66,000. We have an increase in full-time equivalent count from 1.73 to 2.34. So that is so there would be an increase in wage expense of about $70-some thousand, but we have a decrease in miscellaneous. Again, that was a project where they implemented the cloud permitting system. So it was a one-time operating project, so that would come out. And then with the increase in staff member, there would be some increase in subscriptions. There are some increases in building fees. And I do note that the copy you might have, the first line might say under 2023 proposed 0.75, but I've updated this slide. That was something I caught. That was something I caught when I was doing this about an hour ago. And again, this is showing the difference here is the same difference you're seeing, but the fee is 69 cents, which is a 9-cent increase on residential. And then you'll see the other residential accessory buildings and the other fees that are proposed, which you have a copy of as well, that has and which is on the agenda, attached to the agenda. It has the highlights of all the different areas of fees changing. So I won't go through each one of these, but there are proposed building fee changes, and there's a public meeting next week on those fees. So we also have a few changes here to the sewage system fees. Again, I won't speak too much to them other than they are included on the agenda, and you have a package of them as well that are highlighted. So I think what's important to highlight is how the fee is being for building is being calculated. In 2022, there was the base for calculation was based on area footprint. There was a no fee for the basement. In 2023, the proposal is based on finished floor area. There'd be a reduced rate, which would be a third for the basement. And I go through an example on this slide of where Whitewater region in 2023 will fit. And again, it is increased over 2022, but is still below City of Pembroke, Town of Arnprior, Town of Renfrew, and Town of Petawawa. To finish out this section of the budget, we have emergency measures, animal control, and bylaw. Here we will see the FTE count for emergency measures is the same. There's a decrease in the operating budget for emergency measures of about $83,000. This is due to the flood risk assessment. So again, it was a one-time project of a one-time operating project. So that will not be occurring in 2023. Animal control, there's the FTE count of 0.05. There's a decrease of 8,415, and this is mostly due to just the way I've done the budget with livestock claims. Again, we're kind of a conduit between the resident and the province, where we've in the past have budgeted $10,000 in expenses and $10,000 in revenue, when in reality it's a net zero. So I didn't budget any in expenses and any in revenue for that reason. So that's why there'd be an offsetting decrease in revenue for animal control. That's why there's that slight decrease in expense here. Bylaw enforcement, again, there'd be 0.05 of an FTE, no change. And there's an increase of just under $2,000, and $1,500 of that is an increase to our bylaw enforcement contract. So transportation, this includes roads, streetlights, and the airport. So transportation is the largest piece of our operating budget, and there is a significant increase in this operating budget this year. The FTE count is very similar to what it was last year. Again, that difference is to do with student hours. There's a wage increase that's about 24,000. Seminars and workshops increase of 15, but the main two drivers are the fuel increase. So when we saw that $155,000 increase in fuel, that's mainly with transportation and roads. And then there's equipment repairs and maintenance increase of about $105,000. So with the aging equipment that we have, with some of the aging equipment that we have significant repairs, and our mechanics are busy. And with that, with the inflation in parts and pieces and what they deal with going up, that is very similar to our 2022 actual. We have line painting and cold mix increase for combined of $40,000. So there'll be some roads getting, or some paint getting put on concrete, whether it's on roads or parking lots. And then cold mix is filling the potholes, and then filling the potholes as best we can, which we're obligated to do by law when we become aware of them. The gravel road program. So what's important here is just want to include a map. The gravel road program will be occurring. Again, there's a $100,000 line item associated with this. In 2023, it'll be about 6.8 kilometers. And if you have your magnifying glass on, or have your magnifying glass with you, is the orange color, which I know that you're given the black and white, so that doesn't help you. But on your iPad that you have in front of you, you do have an orange. It is in color, and it'd be orange is what you'd be looking at for 2023. Some user fees changes for civic address sign, a replacement sign, and that would be us installing, would be $100. We have sale of used culverts, so we proposing it for that to be $250. And then there's an increase in entrance permit and civic address sign. Streetlights and airport. So for the streetlights, it's almost the same budget. So this would be maintenance to the streetlights and the energy that the streetlights use. So we'll see, probably get a good sense in 2023 with the replacements that have occurred, what efficiencies over the course of a full year, and then maybe that will be an item in the future that might be able to come down because of the LED lights. But it's a close, very close, similar amount for 2023 versus 2022. We have the airport. So in 2022, we contributed we had a $100,000 line item for the airport. Typically, our line item there has been between 20 and 25,000. That's based off of our assessment. So really, the decrease of 75,000 here is because we aren't contributing to, and forgive me that I get them mixed up. There's project runway and fuel tanks. I think our contribution was for fuel tanks in 2022. So we've scaled back the budget here because that was a one-time or budgeted item. We've scaled it back to be more in line with what it was previous, around that $25,000 mark. Environmental services, so that includes wastewater and water, which we spoke on, recycling, waste, and then landfill. So recycling, waste, and landfill, there's a decrease here in recycling expenses, about 11,000. This is down. Recycling contract cost went down slightly, but our processing went up, so it nets out to about 11,000 overall decrease. We have an increase in waste of 1,400. This is due to some hazardous waste expenses that we have, or that we project that we'll have. And then landfill, it's an increase of 42,000. And in there we have a landfill site study, fuel and oil increase of about 7,000, and services and rent, so increase of 7,500. So the landfill site study of 15, fuel and oil of 68, and then services and rent of 75. And again, the FTE count stays the same, 2.11. So we proposed waste for the waste collection fee to go from 164, which was at 160. Recreation and cultural services, so this includes parks, tourist booth, economic development, arenas, social services, libraries, and museum. So with parks, we have a decrease of $4,200. So that's a very similar line item to previous years, or to the previous year. In arenas, here we have a total increase. We have an increase of about $54,000. The FTE count from 4.87 to 5.81. We've increased the repairs and maintenance to $25,000, or an increase of $25,000, and we increased in utilities. So when I spoke about utilities earlier, that factors into the arena significantly. And I've showed on this slide here, because we are budgeting to have the 3 arenas open. So we know that we have 2 open right now for the beginning of 2023, but then we are budgeting to have the 3rd arena open in September, or in the fall. So I know this is something that was brought up about the utilization rate, but we anticipate that having the 3 arenas, we'll be at a 55% utilization of prime ice hours. And then over to tourist booth and economic development. So the tourist booth, again, very similar line item. It's very a minuscule line item in our budget. With economic development, we have a decrease of $52,000, and that is due to not having the business outreach officer, so that contract. So we did, some of that was offset by a grant, but the contract got extended in 2022, so there would be a decrease to that section of the budget. Social services, so this is the senior program. Here we have, what really we are proposing this budget is that we'll have 12 months of this program, and it'll be for 20 hours per week. So as you can see, the expenses would be budgeted more than in 2022, but we have revenue sources identified, $53,000, and internal support. So the township's portion, whether that's in kind or whether that's picking up some expenses, would be in the vicinity of $10,000. So really finding the external revenue support is critical, or has been critical for this program. So we anticipate to have it 12 months for 20 hours per week. Library and museum. So all that's changed with the library and museum is that the way we're still going to have the same or very similar, same for library, a $90,000 line item. and an $85,000 grant for museum. It's a $11,100 line item, up $1,100 from 2022, and the grant is up $100. So it's very similar line items to than 2022. The only thing that has changed is the way we won't be giving them that full amount and then invoicing them back for some of their expenses. So for insurance and hydro and those utilities, we'll take that off of their grant. They'll still show that as grant on their financial statements. We'll still show that as a contribution to them, but it's a bit easier, makes it a bit easier administratively. So planning development has planning, the industrial park, and drainage. So in planning, we have a decrease of $21,000, and that's mainly due to, again, in 2022, we had the joint growth and zoning project. The FTE count here is very similar, and that's planning. User fees and planning, very similar to building. Some of these have changed. So the holding zone removal is a $25 difference. Minor variance is a $100 difference. Site plan control approval will be a $100 difference. And there's a handful of other fees here that are either $100 or a $25 increase. Industrial park and drainage. So industrial park, we won't have any line item or operating expenses at the industrial park in 2023. And then in drainage, we have an increase here of 52,000. We have to CCTV some of our municipal drains and get our municipal drains, continuously improve our knowledge and our records of these municipal drains. And then we have a drainage superintendent that we also outsource. So that takes care of the operating piece, and moving into capital and special project budget. So the funding sources will be the first item I speak to. So in the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund is our allocation for 2023 is $561,652. What's important to recognize moving forward is that it'll be calculated using forward-looking current replacement values. And why that's important is the way that the general ledger will be advantageous for every municipality if they're not there yet, but factoring in costs that it takes to bring assets to life. So whether that's wages, wages would be the main driver. So that's not showing in operating, would show in your assets as an asset or an asset cost, because that's going to drive up your current replacement value and hopefully would increase your allocation. But that's a bit of a side note. Some eligible projects from OCIF are capital construction of new core infrastructure, capital maintenance for renewal, rehabilitation and replacement of core infrastructure, or it can also relate to asset management software, training, or third-party condition assessments. So the Ontario government is, everyone knows about asset management. They're making it a major priority, and so they're allowing municipalities to use some of their OCIF funding for those operational costs, as opposed to being what traditionally has always been for capital projects. Then we have the Canada Community Building Fund, CCBF. This is formerly known as the gas tax funding. The allocation for the township is $231,956. Eligible projects here include construction renewal or material enhancement of infrastructure, remediation and redevelopment of brownfield sites, and initiatives that strengthen your municipality's ability to plan for the future. And that third bullet point is a bit broad. So the federal government has expanded what they would allow. Again, this was traditionally, or at least thought of traditionally, as being for core infrastructure, but there is a multitude of different projects for tourism, recreation. There's a lot more flexibility that municipalities have to use that funding. So it's just trying to explain the differences between the two. But our allocation is $231,956 in 2022. So then we also have taxes and reserves. So in 2023, taxation, so that when I spoke about that 4.8% increase, and the when I spoke about the capital reinvestment contribution for 2023, that's what this $635,105 is. And then other sources are are reserves, such as working capital reserves, the development charges, or water and wastewater reserves. And there are other reserves, but until the year-end books come, there's not a whole lot of value in presenting those, because there's projects that are still being funded from those. But these are the main sources of revenue that you'd have, or the township would have, for capital projects in 2023. So for the capital piece, there were 56 projects that were initially proposed by staff that had a value of just over 11 million. And then I go through the breakdown here of how they factored in. 37 of those would have been considered replacements and 19 considered new. Staff, to evaluate these, broke them down into we scored them on a few different aspects, such as health and safety, the impact on service, social environmental importance, and if they were achieving efficiencies. And then we were able to break those into, and we factored those into about 4 different categories to categorize them. And the first one is must have, can't fail. So these are things that staff believe that we must do. Their furnace in the administration building, a compressor at an arena, a dehumidifier, an arena, a hose replacement for fire, and then we have Lookout Road from Powers to La Paz, and this would be DS double surface treatment to gravel. The Lookout Road piece is 3.1 kilometers in length, and you can see it on the map here with it's outlined in yellow. So the average annual daily traffic count there is 99. Then our second category was the timing is right, and this is to deal with, especially the county of Renfrew is putting on a few projects where we're being able to partner in with some other entities, or we've received a grant. So the first one, the Beachburg water treatment plant of $550,000. Well, we received a grant, and so that $550,000 is the township's portion. So that timing for sure is right on this one, as we are receiving some upper levels of funding. We have a 3/4 ton crew cab with a plow. We have Zion line, and note that I've changed this to be determined with the strategic planning exercise. And then we have the flood hazard identification program, road and sidewalk assessment, and master transportation plan. Again, Zion line, I know you'll speak to this more later on, I guess, with through strategic planning exercise, but it'd be 3.2 kilometers in length. And I have provided, my apologies, the capital spreadsheet, and the projects that are going to be probably talked about during the strategic planning exercise are being funded by OCIF or CCBF. So those funds, basically through this budget, the township is committing to have those funds available for road projects, whether it's the project here or throughout the strategic planning exercise, it gets changed, but that's really what we've done. Annual replacements, that was the third category. So each year we replace computers and some of our technology, and that's in around $10,000, and that's we've been doing that the last few years as machines start to wear out and become unusable. Then we have fire personal protective equipment. Again, this is an annual replacement. This is year 3 of the 2020 guaranteed pricing. So it's what we've been doing the last few years and intend to do again in 2023. And then we have strategically important. We have beginning to replace some doors with the locks with a fob lock, as you probably have seen in many buildings. We have a plate compactor and $15,000, a sidewalk machine at $120,000, Again, there's a road project here, $255,000. There's an employee retention piece of $20,000. There's the Ross garage space needs study, needs and design of $20,000. Fire tanker and tandem plow truck. These would be contributions to reserves. But by doing this, you'd be committing, or the town should be committing to replacing these, beginning that process to replace these, because that's going to take time for the machines to get built. So it makes sense this year to budget something to those go to reserves, so that next year when those machines become, after the tender and the building happens, that it's not a hit just in 1 year. So the summary of this is there's $1.775 million investment in capital or transfer to reserves for future capital. There's $712,000 for buildings, $208,000 for equipment, $95,000 for fleet, $200,000 would be contributed to reserves for vehicles, and then there's $560,000 for road projects. And there's $148,105 that would be committed to. We call them special projects. They're not capital in nature, but they're projects that are not, they're like one-time yearly projects that are not, that wouldn't be continuously budgeted each year. So as I spoke in the operating piece, how some line items came down because of one-time projects, well, this would be basically the one-time projects for 2023. So how this boils down to the estimated effect on the ratepayer, note I say estimated. The effect on per $100,000 of assessment would be an increase of $45.40. And for the median single-family detached, so the median single-family detached home in Whitewater region is $179,000. And that would be an increase in lower tier municipal tax of $95 for the year. And the estimated effect on the median single-family detached home, when you factor in tax, water, and wastewater, if somebody has water and wastewater services, their monthly change would be about $31. If somebody just has water services, their monthly change would be $15.58. And then if somebody did not have water, wastewater services, their monthly change would be $7.92. Now again, note I say estimated, as the tax rates will get generated in likely in about May. From now until May, the County of Renfrew will set the tax ratios, and that would affect, if there's many changes there, that might affect the residential tax rate. But with the information we have today at this time, that would be the estimated effect in 2023 for ratepayers. So before I get to my next slide on the public comment piece, the next step here would be the budget would be passed next week, which is February 15th. And then in terms of public comments, we did receive one letter from a ratepayer, Mr. Robert Osborne, that was included on one of the agendas, one of the past, I can't remember which one it was, but it spoke to, and I'm not going to quote it or anything, but basically a tax for an additional tax on properties. But that was included in your packages. But that was the only comment that we've received, or that I've received, based on the 2023 budget. So with that, I will pass it back to the chair and just say thank you for council support and for staff, for all the work that's been put in by staff to get us to this point. So turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Treasurer. And thank you and the staff, everybody who worked so hard to prepare this. It's great to see the message remain pretty consistent between when we first started the process to now. Lots of good discussion on it that got us this far, but thank you for your work and the work of your staff in preparing it. Today's presentation was great, so appreciate it. I will just highlight one thing, that feedback that we received in writing from Mr. Osborne, a resident of the township, is in our 18th of January package, if you want to take a look at that offline. And he is proposing an additional tax of $12 per property. So that's just for your consideration. That's public That's the public feedback that we received in writing to date. Okay, so the 18th of January, regular council meeting, that's in correspondence. Good. I just want to confirm for anybody else online that we have no one available that would like to speak or provide public comment on Zoom. Good. And there is no one here in our chambers to provide feedback to us at this point in time. Good. Then I will put the motion on the table. Council will have a discussion and we'll vote to receive. Okay, so I just got to get out of this and back into my other one. Good. The recommendation before us is that the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region receive the draft 2023 draft water, wastewater, and general operating and capital budgets. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Mover is Councillor Olmsted, seconded by Councillor Moore. And discussion, comments? Yes, Councillor Olmsted, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Two questions, Sean. Way back at the beginning, we talked about the Beachburg water treatment plant of approximately a $500,000 payment, I believe was roughly what our portion is going to be. Do you have any idea roughly when? I think we had 300 and some thousand going to reserves at the end of this year. Are we looking at a couple of years before that payment would have to be made?
I'd ask Lane, he's kind of the lead on the project. I'm not quite sure.
Great.
Yeah, so the project will be, it's currently under design right now with construction later this year, which will follow into the 2022. And the same as you've seen the other projects that it will be budgeted then. Well, budgeted, I guess it's right now, but if council decides to venture the project, it'll be in 2024.
Okay. Yeah, I assume you meant 2023?
This
Yeah.
year, yes.
Yeah, okay. Good, thank you. And just my second question is, you mentioned the ARL of about 1.7, and we're about 1.1-ish, with some coming off and some going on in the next couple of years. When would that have been as of the 1.7, like 2022 rate?
We
I
received.
know it's a complicated calculation.
Yeah, we received one. So what's odd about it is you get one at a point in time, and it has to do with the most recent. So we finished. I get my years mixed up. So I'm still living in 2022 for the year-end purposes, but we received the most recent one based on the 2021 FIR, and that we received not very long ago, and it was in that 1.7 range. But now that we're closing books on 2022, that will get updated based on our 2022 FIR, which we'll calculate on our 2022 FIR, but we won't receive formal notification from the ministry until probably October, November of 2023. So I don't know if that answers your question on how recent it is, but it's fairly recent.
So, like, in your estimation, like, really, we're running at 65% of the repayment limit, and it looks like it's not really going up. I mean, there's some stuff coming off in the next 3 or 4 years. Do you see that being an ongoing good thing for the township?
Yeah, I think that is going to increase your repayment limit because it's a lot of it's based on own purpose revenue, which is your own purpose taxation. So that will naturally, as the levy increases, that's going to increase that limit. And then in terms of, there is some significant payments coming off, especially when you get into the 2028.
Yeah.
The piece that just is with the two road projects, Olmsted Jeffrey and Cameron, Earl, and Vera, with those two projects, there's significant payments. And then depending on, at the point in time, what council decides with the water treatment plant, those would be significant payments added to that repayment limit. So it really is going to be a massaging effort on, as these projects come up and become more real, what's the best strategic play on financing those.
Right.
So I wouldn't say, like, I think it's good that some of these are coming off, you know, especially by 2028. But I think showing a commitment to replacing capital over the, and commitment to the asset management plan is going to help finance some future capital where maybe in the past it might have been debt financed.
Right. And if I may? So years ago, I recall that if you showed too much capacity in your repayment limit, it actually hurt you when applying for funds, for applying for grants, because it showed you had your own capacity to borrow. So, you know, is there a tipping point there where, you know, are we at the tipping point, or should we be, we have been successful, other than the waste treatment plant, in acquiring some funding?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't say you're at the tipping point, because I think the tipping point would be really close to the debt repayment limit. So I'm not sure, I can't speak to the factors that plays with the grants. I think it'd be very hard to get somebody to commit to admitting to that from a provincial government standpoint. I think they would like to say that the grants they fund are ones that meet the criteria. But I would say that probably having the ability to debt finance if municipalities aren't using that is, you're not exercising all of your options available to pay. So I think the township has, used debt financing, to finance projects, whether it was, 5-year debentures to get equipment. As you see, there'll be some equipment because we needed repairs of equipment or replacement of equipment. So, and putting into big projects such as the waste treatment plant. So I think the township here has done a very good job using that capacity, but I can't speak to how that factors into getting grants.
You should be a politician. That's fantastic. Thank you for your answer. Great.
Point taken. It's an important tool that we have to be shown to be using. And I think it's important for us to maintain perspective on that, to highlight the fact that we're at 65% of our capacity. It's at 1.7. How much more do we have left to be able to borrow or debenture? And what should we really be using that for? Those are the strategic questions that I'm hoping that will come up again in our strategic planning session. Good. The seconder to that motion was Councillor Moore, so I'll give the floor to you if you have any questions or comments.
I do. Actually, I've got two. First one was animal control and bylaw. Where do our dogs fit into that? Do they fit in under animal control or bylaw?
Mostly animal control, but if we're using the bylaw officer, or bylaw officer, bylaw company, that contract piece and some of maybe some costs there would fit under bylaw. So really, you can look at them almost as if they're the same section. They're just broken out in our general ledger differently. But dogs per se would fit under animal control. Same as livestock claims, and that would fit under animal control.
Okay, because there could be some increase in funds there coming out this year, depending on what happens, where none of us know what's going to happen down the road with that. So my other question was, well, actually my comment was solar panels of costs will be coming off in 2024. Where does that show up in our budget, and is it worthwhile looking into an addition per se?
So the solar panel repayment comes out of the administration piece of the budget, and then solar panel revenue comes in under services and rents, I believe. And then so when you ask for the additional piece, I don't quite understand. So maybe to put more money into solar panels is what?
Yeah, like I've never seen a report on how much we're making and whether it's profitable, et cetera.
Right.
I know at the time when the CAO at the time took on that contract and debt for the municipality, it's nice to see it finally coming to fruition. But what happened in the interim? How much meat is there in this system, and was it worthwhile, and should we expand on it?
Right. I can speak roughly to it that the revenue generated from the solar panels is, I believe offhand, without being quoted, is in excess of the debenture payments, but it's very, very close. It's within, I would say, I don't know what the number is it's within, but it's within a small number. So it's close.
Okay, so then the second part of that question will go to the mayor then. how does that fit into green energy, et cetera, or green with the federals and provincial and providing funding? If we don't continue on with the project, or if it comes to an end, what happens to our funding?
It's good. It is on our agenda list to talk about for strategic planning and in terms of environment. So I'll get you to hold that question when we talk about it. The point to make note is that the debenture for that, those solar panels ends. It'll be paid up next year. And the rest is just profit. So things like, do we reinvest that in other environmental initiatives? Maybe that's a way that we can kind of finance something environmental into the future. Those are the kinds of things that I'd like to look at during our strategic discussion. Good. The question, if you can give it to the CAO, is, or Lane for later, is what's the projected life of those solar panels beyond the end of the debenture? Okay. So good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions around the table? And I'll just turn, we have Councillor Bell, who was unable to attend in person because of work, but is fortunately, while on call, has been able to listen in. Councillor Bell, do you have any questions or comments?
Not really any comments directed to the actual budget. We've been through it a few times, and yeah, just like to say thank you to Sean and the rest of the staff for putting that all together and the presentations. The one comment, I guess, like we don't have anybody there commenting on the budget from the public tonight. This is the public meeting. How, I know that we've had multiple meetings on it. I know it was posted on the agenda here in the last 48 hours. But do we actively put out anything in the newsletter or on Facebook, any of the social media platforms, just the ability for the public to come in and comment on the budget? Because obviously it's one of those things that we receive a lot of comments on after the fact, but maybe not leading up to. So I was just wondering how we go about it at the township, kind of getting word out that tonight is kind of the public's ability to provide input to everything that we've talked about over the last month and a half.
Yeah, CAO, if you're Deputy CAO, go ahead.
Yeah, so that it was advertised on our social media and in the paper, the Current, and I believe also in a few papers. So it is it is advertised. I think, though, I would echo your comments on you kind of hear about it later when the tax bills typically go out later in August. But we do put it out, and if we have had in the past, people come and make comments. So I'm not quite sure where it stood this year, but we did advertise it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it wasn't really a comment as to how we're going about doing it. I was just kind of wondering the details so I can just have an answer at the ready whenever I have some questions about it later on. So thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions, comments? Awesome. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Yes, and it's passed. Thank you. Next on our agenda is our adjournment. We are adjourned tonight at 5:48 p.m. I don't need a motion. Not to adjourn. It's on the agenda. Excellent. Thank you very much. You can log us off.